Hey guys, this is Lee here, and this is part 2 of how to buy a Sunfish sailboat online. I apologize for the 2 parts, hopefully it's 2 parts, just because I had some trouble with the editing software and it was crashing, so I had to figure out how to upload the video to YouTube. I'm about 3 days late from where I wanted to go, but this is how it has to be so far until I figure it out. Thanks for your patience. And now to the video. Or you could install more aluminum trim, but in this day and age, aluminum trim for a Sunfish is actually pretty expensive. I don't know exactly how much the cost is, but I think it's probably several dollars a foot. Another telltale sign that you got an old Sunfish with a new rudder bracket, so it might look newer from like 1970s to 80s, is the baler. Look at the cockpit and look at the baler. If it's a metal baler or a gray baler, that's generally a 1970 boat and before. So you're probably looking at a 51 to 60-year-old boat if that has a metal baler. I've seen a lot of these boats come across and they have the rudders changed and they put the brackets on and they put the new rudder on, and it's not a deal breaker again. That doesn't mean the boat is not good. Then here's one thing that you might want to really think about is because there's no cuddy cabin, there's also no hiking strap. If you want to put a hiking strap on the boat so you can put your feet under there to give you more leverage while you're sailing, especially when you're reaching upwind or downwind, it's a little bit harder to put in a hiking strap without that cuddy cabin. You would need to put an inspection port to do it well. Just keep that in mind. You do not have to have a hiking strap to sail and to just have fun, especially in lower winds. So there was a major change in about the late 80s, about 1987, 1988, where the aluminum trim on the boat was changed and the boats have a rounded, finished fiberglass edge. Those are called rolled edges versus the aluminum trim, which has a straight edge. Those rolled edges came out at about 88, and the builder also changed from Alcourt AMF to Pearson. Now Pearson, compared to the other builders, do not have the best reputation. Those boats range from the ages of 1988 to about 1992. You could look at the back of the serial number if you actually look at it, and you could tell in the last 2 digits of the serial number, which is on the right side of the transom, if it's 1988 to about 92, beware of those boats. They don't have the best reputations, but in reality, they're going to leak eventually. All boats leak, and it depends on how much they leak. So when you do see one of these rolled edges, you know you have something that's in the late 80s to the early 90s at the oldest. Then after about 1992-93, another builder came in called Vanguard Sailboats. Those boats actually have a really good reputation, so if you find one of these boats that are in pristine condition, I would seriously think about buying it. You could probably get one of those boats that's race rigged. So a lot of them have dollies, and those type of boats actually came with a lot of extras. So you might be looking at costs $1,000 and up. But if you can get one close to $1,000, look carefully at it because you might be getting a great deal. Now on these 1990 boats, which were Pearson built boats, they also introduced 2 more new things. That would be the hiking strap that's built in, and also the North Racing sail. The North Racing sail is a bigger sail than the recreational sail, but what I would suggest when you're looking for a new used boat is that don't even take in consideration the condition of the sail, because if you're looking at something 30 or 40 years old, you're probably going to want to upgrade the sail for whatever reason. It could be ripped, it could be torn, it's just going to be battered over the years. Now if you're just sailing in a very light wind, a lot of the sails that are intact and not ripped can still give you life. But if the sail is ripped, don't let that be a deal breaker. They can either be repaired or they can just be replaced. So a badly conditioned sail is not a deal breaker for most boats. A lot of these boats in the early 90s, they came out with some cool colors and graphics. The hull weight out of the factory is listed at about 129 pounds. So if you're starting to get boats at 140, 150, they're definitely going to have water in them. So in the early 90s, 1993, 94, 95, Sunfish Laser came out with also a new dagger board. It's a resin composite dagger board. I actually happen to have one right here. So this is what it looks like. It has a handle, a nice shape to it. And these dagger boards are used today even and these are competitive with every other new racing piece of equipment. One thing you want to look out for is the condition of the rudder. What I'm going to tell you is not a deal breaker, but it's something to look out for. Back in the 80s and 70s, the rudders were made of wood and they were varnished and they could split over time. So when you're looking for the rudder, especially online, try to see and look carefully, zoom in the picture and see if there's any cracks in the rudder. These can be repaired, but it's something that will crack over time if it's a vertical crack. And if you're sailing in heavy winds, you might want to think twice about sailing with a crack in your rudder. Now, another thing that you want to look at is that some people took a wood rudder and they refinished it to look like a white rudder. Now, this is one of these rudders, and online, you might not be able to notice the difference between this rudder and a composite rudder like this. Looks pretty much the same. However, with the composite rudder, it's usually white throughout and maybe a little bit of scratching here. A wood rudder that's been heavily used and maybe scraped, you might be able to see, if you're lucky, online, this area here. This is where it hits down. This had some fiberglass put in and it's scraped, and then you could see the wood on there. Now that is definitely not a deal breaker, and it's actually possibly been repaired, but this job actually has been pretty good. It looks pretty good, and I wouldn't hesitate using this, especially if you're just sailing around for fun. But it's a little bit rough, but that's definitely not a deal breaker when you're buying a boat. But it's definitely something to take note that this might be an older rudder. Most people do not try to pass this off as a new rudder. They just finished it over time and they made it look good. So when you're looking online, zoom in. Take your two fingers on your phone and zoom in, or click that picture, freeze it, zoom in on each part of the rudder. Now if you have a nice rudder like this, that looks beautiful. However, you can see it had a vertical crack right here. Now let's compare this to my famous Pete Fraker rudder. Pete Fraker made this when he did the different angles, so thanks for him. I have to keep this. This is this is actually my first rudder. I had this is like a before, and it started cracking. And so I had my friend Pete, said, Pete, my thing's cracking. He goes, I could fix that for you. So he took some West system, he put a couple of dowels in there before it cracked, and then he put some layers of fiberglass on here, and he really did a nice job. He shaved this down here to get the angle down to 120 degrees for racing, and he saved the rudder from cracking like this. Now if you don't notice the difference, so look for the crack in the rudder from here, and it usually splits down to one of these. There's a screw hole right here, so look really carefully. Now if you do have a crack here, like I said, it's not a deal breaker. However, you're probably going to want to fix that and have a friend do it if you can't do it yourself, because this rudder is not a cheap rudder. It's not a cheap thing to do at aftermarket. So you could buy a complete boat for $250, and to get one of these online or used somewhere, you might be spending $250, $300. It will be worth it, but you just want to know that going in. So another thing to look at online is to really don't just look at the pictures from its own setting. You want to take those pictures, zoom in on it, and look at every little thing. Look for cracks, look for missing parts. The biggest thing about an old Sunfish from, I would say, the 70s and 80s is look for corrosion, especially if you're in a saltwater area. Bow handles are notorious for breaking. Cleats can come out. Bullseye fairleads can be loose, and the rub rails can come off. All these things are going to take time and effort to fix. Some are easier than others. When I buy a used Sunfish or a new Sunfish, I like to figure out how much does a brand new Sunfish cost. You can find a range for a brand new Sunfish for about $4,600 to about just under $5,000. But you have to keep in mind that doesn't include extras, for instance, like covers, dollies, blade bags, and tacks and shipping. That could easily run a brand new Sunfish with everything closer to $55,000 to $6,000. But keep in mind, if you do want to invest in a brand new Sunfish, you're going to have years and years of fun with it. And also you'll have the backing of the store that sells it to you. So how do you price the Sunfish? It really depends on your budget and market. And like I said, there are certain extras that you could just add in. So for instance, if it comes with a side tech or a dynamic dolly, you're not going to find those used for less than $250 to $350. So if you find another boat without a side tech dolly, which is the same exact thing for $400, but the one with the side tech is $600, the side tech dolly boat is probably a good deal if it's both the same boat. Another thing to look for, and this is only if you could really zoom in the pictures or unless the seller really puts pictures in, is look for corrosion. You want to look for corrosion at the tack of the sail, mostly because you have the interlocking eye bolts there, and a lot of times the salt corrodes that 3 or 4 millimeters of aluminum, and those eye bolts can pull out. This is definitely not a deal breaker, especially if the spars are straight. You can repair them easily if you know how to use a hacksaw and a drill, and it takes a little bit of an effort, maybe 20 minutes. So definitely don't make that a deal breaker, but it's something that if you do look for, you want to know that you're going to have to put some work in. Also, try to zoom in on the mast and look up and down and look for pitting. The biggest issue with a mast is, one, you could get water inside of it. And if it's especially salt water, you could be corroding the mast from the inside out. If it's been stored and it hasn't been washed down, there can be dripping of salt on it causing pitting, which can make the mast weak. Another thing is if it has a cleat in it, that could be a source of weakness, but it's not a deal breaker. However, in my experience, I've broke masts with cleats. But that wouldn't prevent me from buying the boat. One important expensive piece that you want to try to figure out before you even make an offer on the boat, and you're probably not going to see this in photos, is a cracked rudder cheek. The new rudder cheeks were made, I think, in the 1990s, and they're made of plastic like this. This is a rudder cheek. It holds the rudder. It goes like that. These plastic ones are notoriously for cracking, especially if someone goes behind you and you're sailing and they clip your rudder. These things can just snap really easily, and then the rudder just doesn't have the same feel. Is this going to be a deal breaker? No, it's not going to be a deal breaker if you want to buy a boat. However, this part is expensive and it's very hard to get them secondhand. So if you find one of these in like a garage sale, or if you find a rudder for under $50, and if this is aluminum, you're probably better off, if it has the springs and everything, getting an aluminum one. Some racers actually prefer the aluminum ones because they crack less. So this one actually is cracked, if you could see it. So you want to be looking at this area. So this is where the pintle is, and in this area here, this area is not cracked. So most of the time you're not going to see that online in a picture. You could even zoom in. You're not going to see that. But when you do look for the boat, if you decide to go look for the boat and it has one of these plastic ones, look carefully at the rudder. And you can see that this one's not cracked on that side. And this one's not cracked on that side. Also look at the top. A lot of times you could see there'll be a crack there. There's no crack on that. So this one is going to be good. And you can see actually on the top, see that crack right there? And then if you see inside, there's a crack. This will make it not efficient to steer, and it's going to cost a lot to replace. I think a new one right now is about $95. So if you get any value from this video, please smash that like button down below. Really appreciate it. So let's take a look at some boats online. So right now I'm on Facebook, and I'm going to go to Facebook Marketplace. And then I'm going to type in Sunfish, search Sunfish. This sailboat right here for $750. This one, $750, 1970 Sunfish Sailboat. Let's click on this. It is local. Well used and loved Sunfish Sailboat. 2 sails need some work on rudder board to keep from popping up, as is. Hull stored outside. Sails have been in garage, very heavy. Fit in a large minivan with hatch open, being sold as is for $750. Okay, so what's it got here? Okay, it's probably complete. It's recreationally sailed and 1970s. I'm looking at the bottom of this. This is what I'm talking about with the old rudder system. It's been stored underneath, and then there's ivy growing all over this. I would say this is not a $750 boat. There's also a plug that's been put in the transom. When you see a transom plug, that generally means that it was a leaker, and so they're draining through there. For me personally, I would not want to get a boat that's going to need to be this much work. They're saying it's very heavy. Now, when you're talking about very heavy for a sunfish, a normal sunfish that's 130 pounds is heavy enough for 2 people to lift on and off. Now, if you throw in 2 gallons of water at 8 pounds a gallon, now you're looking at 130 plus 16. Me personally, I would steer away from this boat if you just want to get a turnkey boat that you don't want to do any work with. This boat is great for a tinkerer, someone who wants to dry out the boat. They already said it is very heavy. They have the old rudder bracket, so this boat's going to need work. Next to it, it says Sunfish Sailboat rudder with tiller extension, $350. This looks pretty new. Ships for $25.99. Excellent condition, posts 1972. This person is not local. Oh, Highland Park, Illinois. Yeah, so if you're looking at $99 for the cheeks alone, you got the rudder, the tiller. This looks like a fiberglass or a composite board. $350. It looks brand new. So if that's what you're looking at, you almost can get a boat for $350 if you want to use boat. So for instance, let's go down here. This one's a yellow with a white stripe boat. That's $349. It's slashed from $500. And this is from Clinton, Connecticut. So for me, to get to Connecticut, I'm looking at over an hour to 2 hours. So it's good to see what's going on, but I wouldn't buy this boat unless I really, really wanted it, just because of the travel. So I'm looking at this boat, and the first thing I noticed that there's the bow handle's a little bit crusty, but it doesn't look like it's going to break through. You got some life out of there. You got your wooden dagger board, and oh, look at, there's no storage back there. Okay, so I wonder what this says. And then there's a wooden dagger board. Then there's 2 inspection ports, one in the rear, one in the front. So they either use that to drain the boat or to do some work on it. Older model upgraded to new Sunfish design. That's exactly what I was talking about. So this is probably from 1970 and earlier. Inspection port added to effect this repair upgrade. Okay, so they added that rear inspection port so they could put the gudgeon bracket on. That's the proper thing to do that. If you have an old Sunfish and they didn't put an inspection port in there, they're not properly attaching the gudgeon bracket to the transom. You need to get inside the hull to properly do it. So if you have a 1966 Sunfish and they have that without an inspection port, definitely stay clear of that because it's going to pull out. All right, rudder has the usual crack where the tiller attaches. This person's being upfront. Sail is showing its age. If it's a 50-year-old sail, you're going to obviously have age. But his hand stitch patches are holding well. I will respond right away to questions about the boat and request to see the boat. If you still see it listed, it's available. No trailer included. So you got to figure out when you're going to buy a boat, where you're going to put it, how you're going to get it to the water, and how you're going to get it home. What's nice about this, it's like this one's offered for sale by Clinton Sailing Club, which is a 501c3 nonprofit sailing school. So the proceeds for this boat, donated boat, will go to the sailing school. So that's nice. Let me zoom in on this. Oh, look at this is interesting. This is exactly what I was talking about. This one, the tack of the upper spar pulled out. So what they did is they just re-drilled the hole and not even cut off the rotted end. Well, they did cut off the rotted end, and there's no end cap on the upper spar. That works, but that bolt is rusty. This boat is a good knockaround boat, possibly for someone who wants to get in on a Sunfish for very little cost. It has an aluminum cheek, so that's probably the rudder's pretty rough, but that's normal for a boat this age. For $350, it doesn't look terrible. I'm looking at the rail. The rail looks all together. The aluminum rail. The back rail looks good. The Traveler is rope, so they replaced that. It's not terrible. The sail definitely is terrible. So you just replace the sail. You can get a sail for $130, $140. That right here, there's a crack in the transom. For me personally, I don't like to work on boats. I would be very aware of that crack. If you're really handy with fiberglass and want to spend a weekend or a few days fixing it, you can. But for me, I wouldn't do it. I don't like doing fiberglass work very much. Especially this is going to be below the waterline. This will leak. But for $350, if you want to part it out, it's definitely not a bad deal. And then here's the old baler. And you can see that's AMF Alcord. All right, let's see what else we got here. Okay, so we have this Sunfish for $575. Alcord Sunfish, late 70s, missing a cleat, bow handle, and drain assembly. We used a wooden plug for a drain. Sails are in good condition. Let's see the sails. All right, colored sail, no window. It's fine. The halyard up there. Sail's dirty. The hull. And it's missing a bow handle, a cleat, and we're looking at the blades here, and they don't seem to have any cracks in it. They're kind of worn. This is a north sail. When you're dealing with a boat that's that old and you want to recreationally sail it, it doesn't actually matter if you have a class legal sail at that point. You should just get a sail. That sail will probably be fine to sail, but this boat does not have a cleat for your main sheet, which is not a deal breaker. But it said it had no dolly and it had no trailer, so you're gonna have to figure out how to get that home. That's another thing. When you buy a boat, do you have a trailer hitch? How are you gonna get it home? Where are you gonna store it? You either need a friend with a truck, a trailer hitch. You can put a trailer hitch on a small car for a Sunfish. Sunfish are light. But one thing is that you don't have the bow handle and the cleats, so you're going to have to install them to be able to sail. Without the cleat for the halyard, you will not be able to sail. So have to know on this type of boat that you will have to do work before you even put it in the water. Another thing about missing a bow handle. If you're missing a bow handle, it really makes life a lot more difficult when you're pulling the boat off the beach, because you got to pull it by the sides of the boat, and then you're on the side of the boat or the mast. And if you have a little bit of water in the boat, it just makes it a lot harder. The bow handle is not even something you think about until you don't have it. So if it's missing a bow handle, you really need to install one. If you need to install a bow handle, to do it properly, you really want to have an inspection port so you can get a backing plate behind that bow handle. unless there's already a backing plate on there, and I am not 100% sure if that backing plate will be good. Buyer beware, installer beware. Alright, let's see this 1850 Sunfish. Okay, so this one doesn't have, this one is a slightly newer one. This is an Outcourt Sunfish, so we're looking at something in the 70s to 80s era. This is a red, white, and blue stripes. I don't remember which color scheme goes with what here, but this one is Outcourt Sunfish, so it has a cubby cabin in here. The rails look nice. This has a new FX sail. The FX sail is a brand sail that is a recreational sail. This does not have a window in it. Also, because it's FX and not North Sail, a Ratsy sail, a Vogue sail, Laser Performance sail, this is not legal for class racing, but for recreational sailing, that's perfectly fine. It has a dolly underneath. Now, here's the thing with these dollies, with the Sunfish dolly. Always read the descriptions. This one, the beautiful Outcourt Sunfish in amazing condition, mast spars, rudder tiller, daggerboard, sail, and hull are all in excellent shape. It doesn't look like a bad shape. He has a lot of pictures. Let's go through these pictures. Sail's brand new. The hull looks good. The rails are good. 1850. The lines are pretty new. It looks in pretty good shape. Definitely good for recreational sailing, and you could probably upgrade this if you want to race it. Here it says dolly is not for sale. So if you wanted to get a dolly is about $500 new, and if you get lucky and find one used, you're probably going to find one for about $250 on the cheap side if you're lucky, and $350. So if you wanted to add a dolly, which I would recommend every Sunfish Sailor have a side tech or a dynamic dolly, it saves your back. You could add another $400 to this cost of the boat before you get on the water. Or you're going to be recruiting your wife or your girlfriend or your husband or your boyfriend or just your neighbor to sail, and that's very inconvenient. They'll start running away when you tell them you want to sail. What's nice, they'll deliver anywhere for no extra charge. So it's a nice boat. It's up to you to figure out your budget and to look at what's around your area, and then you can figure out what's good or bad. 1850, it's not outrageous. So there's really one thing I want to let you know about an older boat without inspection ports. When there's inspection ports are those round plastic hatches that people go in there to either do work for the boat or to try to dry it out. Now, if you get an older boat that does not have inspection ports, it doesn't mean that there's nothing wrong with it. There's also a possibility that the boat has water inside of it. So to check this out, you want to listen for the boat. You want to lift up one side of the boat and listen carefully to see if water is running down the boat. Because water is very heavy, and 1 or 2 gallons of water can make a boat very hard to pick up, very hard to sail, and very hard to right when you capsize. And when you have a little bit of water in there and you go out sailing again, the water will continue to add. So you're going to have to know that you're going to have to dry out that boat or live with a leaking boat. But you just want to make sure you know that before you buy a boat.